What's up, you guys? Time again for the Matinee show. This is Matinee episode 62.
Yeah, 3 good ones.
I know, the lighting's kind of weird in here today. I guess because we were filming this earlier, we had to shut the door to keep the light from blowing out, so...
It's gonna be alright.
Yeah, it'll be okay. So we actually did get to the theater one time this week, so we'll be reviewing that at the end, but the other two are Netflix movies. Both of them Netflix originals, I think.
I think so.
Yeah, and the first one we're going to talk about is Rattlesnake, which came out at the end of October of this year.
That's pretty good.
It was pretty good.
Yeah.
It's weird because like I said, I don't read reviews of the movies beforehand, but I did see percentages, you know what I mean, while I'm kind of looking for a plot rundown. The percentages on this were meh, half and half. Some people liked it, some people not so much. It was written and directed by Zach Hilditch, who was the same guy that directed the Stephen King adaptation 1922, that was also a Netflix original, which was actually very good, and I would recommend it. This one almost kind of seems like a Stephen King story. A little bit.
It has that or something
it has that kind of vibe to it.
Yeah.
I didn't really know how it was going to go when I started watching it, and I kind of recommend that, so I'm going to try not to spoil it. Basically, what the plot of it is, there's just this woman and her daughter. The daughter's name is Clara. She's I guess she's 7 or 8 or something like that. And they're driving across Texas. I think they're trying to get to Oklahoma. And I'm assuming, they don't really tell you till later, but I'm assuming she's leaving her husband or whatever. She's starting over or whatever. So they're driving across the desert, and there's an accident. She has to get off the highway, and her, GPS on her phone goes out because she loses her signal, and then she gets a flat tire. And while she's stopped trying to fix the tire, her daughter gets bitten by a rattlesnake, and creepily, so she's flipping out. She can't get a phone signal and everything. Creepily, she sees a trailer sitting by itself, out in the middle of nowhere that you're pretty sure wasn't there before. So she takes her daughter in there, and the woman that's in there is super weird, and she's oh, I can help, and blah, blah, blah. And from there, things get a little strange.
Yeah, it ends up, she heals the kid, but then this kind of demonic guy shows up later and tells her that in exchange for healing that kid, she's got to kill somebody and deliver a soul. So she doesn't believe it at first, but then she gets convinced. There's paranormal stuff happens.
Yeah.
And she goes out and tries to select a person to kill. That's part of the movie. In order to save the daughter. It's pretty cool. It's kind of old school storytelling in terms of for this kind, like you said, it's almost like an 80s Stephen King type of story.
It reminded me of that, maybe Riding the Bullet or something like that. That type of vibe it had to it.
A lot of desert action. Sometimes reminded me of, I don't know, the Hitchhiker or the Hitcher.
The Hitcher, yeah.
The Hitcher kind of reminded me. So, it's just, it's an enjoyable movie. It's just something you put on, you watch, you go, yeah, that's pretty cool, but it's not like a blockbuster. That's not what you're dealing with.
And like I said,
it's not supposed to be that.
Yeah. This was a perfectly enjoyable kind of thriller mystery. I don't know if I'd call it a horror movie exactly, even though it does have kind of a supernatural element, but it does kind of fall in that area where you could sort of call it a horror movie. It's more like a thriller, I guess.
Supernatural thriller.
It's a supernatural thriller.
Suspense, adventure type.
Yeah, and actually, I think I enjoyed it more not really knowing what direction it was going in. You know what I mean? Because I didn't expect it to go necessarily in a supernatural direction, although you figure it out pretty early because, after the girl gets bit by the rattlesnake and she's, dying and everything like that, then you see the trailer and I'm like, wait a minute, that trailer wasn't there. And then this creepy woman and then she heals the kid, and then I'm like, okay, we're descending into paranormal kind of shit here. This is kind of like a thing where, at first I was kind of like, well, maybe the woman is just kind of, maybe the mom is just kind of imagining it, because we watched a movie that was on Netflix a while back, that was kind of that was like that, where this bad shit happened, and then I can't remember the name of it right now. It was a month or two ago that we reviewed it, where bad shit happened, a little girl got killed, or you thought she got killed, and then the dad he goes to the hospital and then they disappear, you know what I mean? So there was that whole thing. So this kind of had that kind of vibe to it. I think I probably liked this one a little bit better. Just because I thought it was cool that I didn't really know that it was going in that direction.
It's just a well-made, low-budget movie. Linear storytelling, pretty traditional. You don't have to worry about any kind of subversion of your expectations or anything. Yeah, you don't know how it's going to go down, but it's just solid.
But
solid
it keeps
movie.
you like interested. Yeah. It keeps you invested in the mystery, and then once she figures out like what she has to do to keep her daughter alive, then it kind of because we were sitting there like talking about it's like, what would we do in this situation? Like, who would we kill? You know what I mean? So it's like, and she does like pretty logical shit. Like she goes through like the logical shit that you would think of. You know what I mean? Also, the guy that's in this, we were watching it, and the one guy who's like an asshole that she's kind of like gunning for. The whole time we were like, God damn it, who is that guy? He's like so familiar. So we had to like look him up because we couldn't remember. He played Shades on Luke Cage.
Yeah. As soon as I searched that dude's name and saw him in the suit, I immediately recognized him from Luke Cage series.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, oh yeah.
That's
it is.
He was the guy that like wore the sunglasses.
That was a great character he did.
He really I really liked him in that show.
Did a good job in this movie too. It's just a good movie.
Yeah.
It's a good movie.
Like I said, it's like a lot of Netflix originals where it's like, nothing to throw a party over or anything, but it's a perfectly enjoyable.
It's better than watching just shit. You know what I mean? You can watch shit.
Watching literal shit.
Yeah,
just
you can
like
watch
a pile of shit.
And you know what I mean? And you'll be like, man, fuck this. This one, it's like you said, it's on par with a lot of the Netflix
originals, which are just like,
they're good. They're good.
They're not like Oscar winning, like mind blowing, like oh my god, that's my favorite movie ever. Yeah. But it's like a perfectly enjoyable way to spend a Friday night.
A lot better than a B movie.
Yeah. So, if you're kind of in the mood for something like that, kind of a supernatural thriller type of thing.
Kind of a Stephen King-y
type thing with like, kind of some nice big desert vistas, like I said, kind of like the Hitcher type of thing.
Yeah, Hitcher and Hills Have Eyes. There aren't any mutants in it, but there's a bunch of like desert hunting people down in the desert caverns and shit like that.
Now that you mention it, it is kind of like the Hitcher because that almost kind of had like a little bit of a supernatural.
It did.
Or it could have had a supernatural tinge to it. I mean, this one, it was much more overt that it was supernatural, even though you could argue that the whole thing happened in her head, but I don't think it did. Because she finds out later that there's like all these weird murders.
Yeah, the devil's involved. The devil or it's a witch. It's either a witch or the devil. It's up to you.
Yeah, because the figure she keeps seeing is that woman from the trailer. You only see her like at the beginning in the trailer, but then in the rest of it, she's kind of like this shadow, like in the background, almost like she's some demonic, or she's the devil. I don't know.
And the dead come back and give warnings, and there's one of them that's kind of like a familiar. Either that or that's the devil, and he's a demon. It's just it's open to interpretation.
Yeah, definitely. But, it's pretty cool pretty cool movie to check out. All right, so the second one, also a Netflix original. This one actually came out way back in March, I believe, but somebody requested that we do this one, and we didn't review it at the time it came out, even though we did watch it at the time it came out.
We watched it again, we
were going to review it. This is The Dirt.
Yeah, story of Motley Crue.
The Motley Crue biopic.
Yeah. It's good because, they tell you that it isn't totally accurate. When they change things, they say, well, it didn't actually happen that way. But,
which reminded me of 24-Hour Party People, if you guys have seen that.
This is kind of the official story of, what went down with them and how they formed and their lives and, what happened with the car accidents and people
the heroin overdoses and children dying from cancer. It's a terrible story,
and
you guys.
Everybody's screwing everybody else's girlfriends and wives.
What was that about?
They just couldn't keep their hands off each other. They just
couldn't resist it.
Well, I think it was the kind of women they attracted, I think.
That too.
Groupies and groupie type women. Although Heather Locklear was a stand-up chick.
But eventually even Tommy Lee screwed around on her and she took off.
He fucked that up. She left, right.
Yeah. He was screwing a porn star or something.
Yeah.
But apparently this movie, because this is based on the book, that was written by all four members of Motley Crue, along with Neil Strauss, I think was the author that helped them out with it. That came out more than a decade ago. Apparently they've been trying to get this movie made since 2006, right? Yeah. MTV Films was going to do it, Paramount was going to do it, and then I guess they dicked around for too long, or they wanted too much money. I don't know what the problem was, but somehow they just never got around to doing it. And then finally, I think Netflix bought like the worldwide rights to the book in 2017, and then they started finally filming it. I will say that like all the actors that they got to play the members of Motley Crue are like really good.
Yeah, they're funny.
They're really funny. The movie is like, it's not real. I've seen it called, like, one review of it that I read, I've seen it called like an R-rated Wikipedia article of a movie, which I can see. Like they said that there wasn't like a whole lot of like substance to it, but it's like fun to watch, you know.
Yeah, the movie reminds me very much of Howard Stern's biography. What is it?
Private Parts.
It reminds me a lot of that movie. If you like that movie, you'll like this one. It's comedy.
Yeah, it's basically a comedy, even though like
there's a lot of tragedy
happens. A lot of bad shit happens in this movie.
It's kind of comedy.
I mean, because, you know, and I feel like, because I'm not a big Motley Crue fan. I mean, like I said, I think Motley Crue's heyday was like when I was in junior high or like early years of high school. And, you know, I was more into like post-punk, new wave, that type of stuff. And our nemeses were the people that listened to Motley Crue, because back in the 80s, like the people that listened to Motley Crue were like kind of the jock, like meathead types.
Or metalheads too.
Or metalheads too.
But it was a little mainstream. I mean,
it's exactly. That's
it was
what I'm
a little
saying.
mainstream even for me. I was into metal really at that time. I think I had the first 2 albums.
Yeah.
I don't think I bought the third one.
And their first albums were pretty good.
Yeah, Too Fast for Love, I liked it. Kind of had a fast goth punk kind of influence to it, because it was, you know, early in the scene in L.A. And Shout at the Devil was almost kind of like it was actually like a Kiss album, except every song was good on it.
Yeah.
That was the difference, because if you bought a Kiss album,
it's like one or two good
songs. They knew what they were doing. Kiss knew how to make money.
Well,
they knew how to sell lunchboxes. That's what they did.
Yeah, I think even I had a Kiss lunchbox, and I didn't even like Kiss. I just thought the lunchbox was cool.
But I always liked the band, and I liked what they were doing back in the day. Back in the day, they were. Some would say that it was a Kiss copy by the time Shadow of the Devil came out, and maybe it was a Kiss copy, but it still worked. And it did it a little bit better. It was more updated, I think. You know, they didn't use so much face.
Well, and their songs generally, like you said, were better than
they were better.
Kiss songs.
Yeah, they were better than Kiss. Even though Kiss had some fucking awesome songs.
Yeah,
they did. Even that Animalized album had like one good song on it. But that was their marketing, I think.
Yeah,
Kiss was just, okay, we're gonna put out an album. You know, how many good songs you want to put on it? Let's put 2. Let's
put 2 good songs, and then we'll just shit out the rest.
Yeah. Because they were trying to make as many albums. Kiss was trying to make as many albums as they could. They knew that their fans would buy it.
Yeah.
It was like buying a single. When you bought an album, it was more like you were buying a single with a bunch of B-sides.
I feel like a lot of albums are like
that.
They were
like that. But no, it's a good movie. You know, especially if you kind of grew up during that time, or you know, and kind of brought some stuff back. There's some iconic scenes where dude shows up. What's his name? Ozzy Osbourne shows up at the pool and snorts up a line of ants. Pisses on the ground, licks up his own piss, and then fucking Tommy. Was it Tommy Lee?
I think it was Tommy Lee that was like
pissed on the ground.
That he's like trying to like one up him.
Which that may have been something that may have been something that they actually did, because these dudes were dorks, really, if you ask me.
Yeah, well.
I mean, people that don't hang around with fucking bands or don't know anybody, you know what I mean? They think, oh man, it kind of, that's cool, you know? Not really. Those dudes are fucking dorks.
Well, yeah.
They were young and dumb, you know what I mean? And they're trying to be rock stars and doing stupid shit, you know?
That's what I mean. There's one thing about, okay, so like we were talking about this, and I don't know if this is because I'm getting old. I don't think so, because I thought this when I was younger too. This is why I was not into like Motley Crue or like all that kind of more mainstream kind of music, because it just seemed like the people were just like dumb meatheads, and it's like they were just doing this shit because they thought that it would make them cool, I guess. So it's like, hey, I'm gonna run around this hotel naked and like trash everything, and like they set shit on fire, and like you know, it's like, what if you were in the next room over and you were like, man, shut up?
Well, they're kind of like the young scene kids that we know.
Yeah.
Really. And they don't really come from anything. They live in fucking terrible fucking houses and fucking rough families and shit, you know what I mean? And imagine that they just stumble into a bunch of fame and a bunch of money. They would go fucking wild. And
it's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, and that's what they were doing. Destroying hotel rooms. And they're just basically California white trash kids.
Yeah.
You know, they don't know what the fuck they're doing.
And, you know, it ended up, like, biting him in the ass, like, later on.
Yeah, they made a lot of bad decisions.
You know, Vince Neil, like, ended up killing the guy from Hanoi Rocks because they were drunk driving.
Yeah.
You know, and also Vince Neil's little daughter died of cancer. That wasn't his fault, obviously.
His fault.
But
the drunk driving thing, that could have gone either way because fucking what's-his-name was drunk, too. They were all drunk.
Yeah, they were.
You get into a damn car, whether you're the driver or the passenger, you're responsible.
Yeah.
If you ask me. You know, the law is going to say something different.
Yeah.
That the driver's responsible. But if you got fucking two dudes and they're both blasted and they both get in that car, they're both guilty.
Yeah, well, because
that passenger knows
you
too.
kind of knew what was.
You knew what was going on.
Also, didn't one of them died of a heroin overdose and then was brought back?
Yeah, it's Nikki Sixx.
Nikki Sixx died of a heroin overdose.
Yeah, that was a good
briefly.
Scene.
Yeah, and you know, it's just like terrible. Like I said, they were all like fucking each other's girlfriends. It's like
backs.
You know what I mean? Like fucking Tommy Lee punched a woman in the face. It's like
she was a bitch though.
She was. Yeah.
She was crazy too. That's another thing is that the women in some ways were worse than them.
Yeah.
Because they were just kind of like parasitical. They just wanted to, you know, they
just wanted to hang out. They just wanted to hang out
with rock stars, and then they treated rock stars like shit, tried to control them and shit. So you know,
it was just terrible people all around.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean.
I can see it though. I mean, shit, they were in their 20s.
Yeah.
You know, with all that money, that shit would go bad if you don't have a history of having money.
Yeah, I do feel like that's because then you just piss it away, man. Because it's like you've never had it, you can just do whatever you want to do.
Yeah, Nikki had like a fucking $1,000 a day heroin habit, and he didn't think that was a big deal.
I can't.
And imagine you go from just like living basically in fucking poverty to being able to afford $1,000 a day just on heroin and not really think
anything about it.
Yeah,
like I said, I don't.
There's a lot of money.
I don't even know how all of them are still alive, right? How can all of them still be alive?
Yeah, I think they're all. And it was funny how they're calling Mick Mars an old man, and I think he was 31 at the time.
Yeah, maybe. Well, he was, you know, he seemed
older
like an old
them.
man. Well, when you're like 18, 19, 20 years old, a 30-year-old does seem like an old person.
It didn't really say so in the movie, but based on what I had read and what I had heard, it was actually Mick Mars was the brains in the music, really behind the whole band, and he was the one that kept them all kind of in line and kept that machine rolling.
And they do kind of imply that in the movie because the guy that plays Mick Mars is like a lot more,
more stable.
He's a lot, you know, he gets drunk too, and like he does drugs and shit too, but he kind of like
he's an adult.
He's kind of more an adult.
Yeah.
You know, he's already got like an ex-wife, I think, at that point, and he's got like a house and everything. So he kind of keeps things from getting too crazy, although he doesn't always succeed because the other three are such jackasses.
He tends to be rolling his eyes in the background whenever they're doing
stupid shit. Because like I said, as you would, like once you're 30, 32 years old,
you're
and
like,
you've already got one marriage behind you and all this other kind of shit, like whatever. I'm like, you know, they've already.
He's like, oh, here they go again.
Right. It's like they're just like.
Yeah, and they go about he had a big bone problem with his spine and everything.
Yes.
And they get into that. His spine constantly hurt him. Felt like there was quicksetting concrete in his spine.
Yeah, he had to get hip replacements, I think.
Yeah.
Because that was at one point, like when they came out of the hospital, I think they had given him new hips at that point. I mean, I think they because I haven't read the book. You know, I know a lot of the Motley Crue stories because you know they're famous, and I kind of grew up around that time, and you couldn't really avoid them, even though I wasn't a big fan or anything. But so I know like a lot of the famous stories about Ozzy Osbourne and the Ants and the.
They had a great look.
They did,
especially in the Shout at the Devil album.
Yeah,
they look good. They kind of had an early goth kind of, in a way, kind of like a goth.
Yeah, well, a little with it's more
punk
glam,
rock,
really.
Punk rock, yeah.
And they made a lot of jokes in the movie about them wearing their girlfriend's pants,
which they did. And their girlfriend's boots. And
Vince Neil was like he was really bitching because I guess his first bitchy girlfriend that had that $800 white leather pair of pants that he was always wearing.
Yeah, and
she
took it.
Yeah, she took him back, and he was more upset about that than losing the girlfriend. Although, like, she was pretty cunty, I gotta say. Yeah. Well, at least in the movie, she might be a perfectly nice person in real life. I don't know.
Well, they were all pretty young, I think.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, kind of everybody was awful people, but in that sense, it's like fun to watch them.
Yeah.
Like, look at those idiots running around doing that shit.
What's funny is that like the whole band groupie thing is a thing of the past. That's not really happening much anymore.
Yeah, that seemed like it was kind of like an 80s.
Yeah.
phenomenon.
Everybody we know in the band's always like cooking, you know what I mean? Where are all the girls, man? It's not like it was.
Yeah, it's like you don't start a band to get laid anymore. No. That's not how it works.
No.
I think that worked up until the 80s, maybe the early 90s, and then after
they have admirers, but it's not like it was.
It's not like it was. You don't get like this kind of like... Yeah, like all the heavy... Well, it depends on the genre, too, I guess.
Yeah. Well,
because it's it seems like, Motley Crue, that's heavy metal and shit like that in the 80s. That was more... Yeah. You got like all these like skanky sluts like being like, yeah, hey, I'll blow you, whatever. But it's like, you know what I mean? Other genres didn't really have that.
Well, they also pointed out that whenever they pulled into town, the first place they went was the strip club. And that's where they started drinking and doing all their stuff in the strip club. Yeah. Before the shows.
Yeah.
So
vomiting on strippers.
Yeah, they would wake up at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. You know?
Nice.
Yeah.
Then let's go barf on some hookers.
Yeah.
And then like their manager like fucking I think it was Tommy Lee, like their manager, they had to like handcuff him to the bed so he wouldn't like get up and cause any more trouble.
Yeah.
Because he was like, he had blacked out and he's like, he's gonna wake up and like do some shit he doesn't remember and it might be really bad. So.
They set fire to expensive hotel rooms by accident by letting off fireworks, shooting fireworks at Niggy Six while he was asleep in bed.
Like you do.
Threw a television out the window of an expensive hotel and landed on a guy's Mercedes.
Yeah.
Crushed it.
Busted up a guy's Mercedes.
And they said it was an accident.
Yeah. And then kept throwing stuff.
Yeah.
Like, look, that was an accident too. Whoops.
Yeah. It didn't matter. They had money. They could pay for anything.
Well, that's probably what they figured.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But yeah, so like I said, it's almost kind of like if you guys remember like VH1 Behind the Music, it's like that, but movie form with lots more titties and swearing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if you like that kind of thing, because they, I mean, obviously because it's just like a short movie, they kind of have to skate over a lot of stuff. They do get into like the shitty stuff because you can't avoid it. Like I said about Vince Neil's daughter dying and him killing and him killing that guy in the car crash and the heroin and all that other stuff. But it follows very much that VH1 Behind the Music arc where it's like, oh, we're a scrappy young band and we're like millionaires and this, and then everyone's on heroin and everyone's like, and it's just like this terrible. And then they show them like now and they're all fat. Like,
well, I don't think they
trying to do a reunion tour.
I don't think they were all on heroin. It was just Nicky Six.
Just mostly him, yeah. They were doing other drugs though.
I think they did a little bit of everything.
I think they're kind of like big cokeheads and stuff, I think. But yeah, so he was the only one that actually like died from that and then had to break. That was like a funny scene when he died and he was in the ambulance and they were just like gonna let him go because he was dead, and then like the one guy in the ambulance was like a big fan. He's like, this is Nicky Six, man, I gotta bring him back. And he's like sticking adrenaline in his chest.
He hit him twice
in his fucking heart and whatnot. He pulled a Pulp Fiction on him. But yeah, so if you like Motley Crue, even if you don't, it's still pretty entertaining. Like if you're not into the band, I thought it was pretty entertaining. It's like a pretty fun watch. It's like I said, it's a definitely good drinking movie. Yeah. And it came out a while back, but somebody asked us to do it and I was like, oh yeah, we saw that, let's do it. Okay, so the third movie we saw this week, we actually got off our asses and went to the theater to see Midway.
Yeah. I thought this one was going to be about like Ford versus Ferrari, but and it kind of is. But Ford versus Ferrari was better, even though this is a good movie.
Yeah.
I saw the original, and the original was like a half Japanese and half American effort to put the tale of the Battle of Midway together, and you kind of saw the battle from both sides. And this also was like that. It did show some Japanese studio symbols, like they were involved. There is a lot of Japanese language in it. And
there was a lot of Chinese investment in this movie also.
Yeah, they mentioned the Chinese with some of the guys, Doolittle's bombing raid.
Yeah.
The problem with the movie, I thought, was that the CG kind of took me out of it sometimes.
Yeah, me too.
It's not bad CG, it's just that what they tried to do is very large in scope. Like from when you see the back of a big carrier, the carrier leaves a pretty big wake behind it, and it just has a certain look, and the look of the wake didn't look right. You could tell that it was not real. And when planes hit the water, it just didn't. That's not the way it looks. I mean, I've seen the war footage of planes hitting the water, and it just it just didn't really look all that right. But the acting was really solid. It had about half the cast of Alita Battle Angel in it.
Yeah, that kid that was in Alita Battle Angel that played like her boyfriend or whatever.
Yeah. The acting was really good. It was accurate. The movie was pretty accurate.
I looked up later on to see how, because I was curious. I don't think I ever saw, because the original Midway, well, the movie came out in 1976. Charlton Heston was in it, right?
Yeah, I think so.
I don't know if I saw that. I probably did. I've seen like so many movies, but this one seemed like I was curious to see like how accurate the shit was, and this is actually almost entirely historically accurate. There's just like a couple little things like those two pilots that got ejected and they got taken by the Japanese. Yeah. They said they actually were not killed on the same day as the battle. That was actually 2 weeks later.
Right.
And they were actually tortured and stuff.
Okay.
How they were killed, because they only showed one of them getting killed in the movie, like with the anchor, and they threw him overboard. They said that's similar to how they were both got killed. I think they tied them to gas cans and like threw them overboard. Mm-hmm. They didn't show the second guy getting killed.
Right.
But they said, so that was a little inaccurate. But other than that, it's fairly accurate. There was just like a couple things, like one character like was switched out for another one and stuff like that. But other than that, it kept pretty much to how the shit really happened.
Some of the scenes when they were doing the dive bombing on the Japanese ships, I mean, it looked really good. But then sometimes it started to just become overload, where there's too many airplanes in frame, and it starts to become a little too surreal. I mean, that's just what it seemed like to me. Sometimes the angles didn't quite look right, and the distances didn't really look right. You know what I'm talking about? Did you get that? Sometimes I was pulled out of the movie because things just didn't look natural. Didn't look right.
That's something that it's like not so much in the battle scenes, like that kind of threw me off too, but it's like it was even in scenes where, you know, there wasn't any battle stuff going on. Like even when they showed like, you know, people standing on like an aircraft carrier, and like there's like this weird kind of like blurring around the edges of their figure, I guess because of green screen, and the lighting was just like very weird and like very flat.
Right.
So it almost seemed like the whole thing almost looked like a dream sequence, except it's not supposed to be. And like it didn't look realistic.
Then they made some scenes that were kind of almost retro out of the first movie. So it either is supposed to be realistic or it isn't. You have to pick a lane.
Yeah.
Like for instance, you know, they're flying along, and I think it's a Dauntless or a Douglas. I don't remember what it was. That I think it was a Dauntless. It was that torpedo bomber, a 2-seater. Was it? I don't remember. They didn't think they. Anyway, the canopy's open and their masks are off, and they're flying. You know, probably at like 200 knots, and they're talking to one another.
Yeah.
And it's quiet. No. It doesn't go that way. I mean, in the 101st, whenever we flew with the doors open, it was like opening up the door to hell.
Yeah.
Just nothing but pandemonium out there, you know? 200-mile-an-hour winds, and then the fucking scream, fucking prop wash and shit. You can't talk to somebody with canopy open, talking to the guy in the back. That's something out of movies.
Yeah.
But it just kind of took me out of it. I was like, no, that can't happen. Because, you know, that big old radial engine was sitting in the front. There's no mufflers on it.
Yeah.
The headers fucking exit right there in front of the cockpit. You know, it's just deafening.
That's the thing, though. It's like, it's hard to do because, I mean, any kind of movie like this where they're recreating, like, very famous battles, very famous incidents, it's like I guess you have to have that type of stuff in the movie, like, for suspense and, like, tension purposes, because you have to have, like, you know, the pilot and the guy in the back, like, talking to each other, even though in real life they can't, because you can't hear each other, because otherwise it would just be, like, closed in and there would be nothing, and the audience wouldn't know what was going on necessarily, and there wouldn't be any, like, you know, you wouldn't feel any, you know, fear for the pilot or anything like that, because you wouldn't be able to see their face or you wouldn't be able to hear them, and you weren't really sure what was going on. You would just see the plane moving.
They usually had like some kind of throat-mounted microphone, and they had their masks on all the time, you know. So really, it's kind of what you heard from the inside of the cockpit. It's more what you heard, you know, like in Star Wars: A New Hope, the very first Star Wars movie where they're running down the trench, the Death Star trench, you know. That's what it sounds like, you know.
Yeah.
Red 5, you're just a bunch of dudes talking, and it's not really a naturalistic sound because it's coming off their larynx.
Yeah.
And that's really, there wasn't any of that in the movie, so you didn't really get that feeling that you're listening to groups of guys fighting from airplanes. There's recordings of it. You can listen to it yourself. You know?
Like I said, I guess for cinematic purposes, they have to do it. But like I said, if you're trying to make something realistic, it's kind of hard to find a way to work around.
Right,
that,
you have to pick a lane. It's either going to be theatric or it's be realistic, and this one's kind of tried to mix it. But you know what? Aside from all that, it was a good movie.
I mean, I especially liked the guy that played Best, I guess was his name, Dick Best, the kind of maverick pilot character.
Yeah, he played the bounty hunter in Alita Battle Angel, the one that got his face cut off.
That's right.
Yeah.
He's British, isn't he?
Yeah, or Australian or British
or something like that. Yeah.
They're all the same.
All you non-Americans. Yeah. But yeah, so he's the character that I guess you relate the most to because he has the most screen time. He has the most backstory, with his wife and daughter. And I feel like he had the most personality because a lot of the other characters, Patrick Wilson's character and Dennis Quaid is in it, Woody Harrelson is in it, but they don't get a lot of screen time and you don't really get to see their background or their story or anything like that. So I feel like I'm glad that they kind of had the best character in there. I mean, it's a real guy. Obviously, he was based on a real guy. But I like that he was in there and they gave him more of a backstory, with his family and everything, because he's somebody that you could kind of get into the movie with. Yeah. Because other than that, it's just a bunch of dudes standing around what are we going to do with this battle and stuff like that. So you don't really get a lot of emotional connection.
They followed some of Yamamoto's story.
They did, yeah.
Okay, but they didn't follow any other Japanese people's story, which I think they should have thrown in the story.
They should have, actually.
Of a couple of Japanese
as a
pilots.
Mirroring type of...
Yeah, because the idea of the original movie, Midway, was a joint effort between Japan and the United States to make a movie about this battle.
Yeah.
And I don't even think maybe in the Japanese version, the edit might be slightly different. Maybe there's more Japanese.
Yeah, that's possible. Maybe
it's possible.
Yeah.
But I think it should have been one where should have had stories about the Japanese guys and the American guys.
Yeah.
Because you have to remember that the Japanese guys they're the good guys from their point of view. They're trying to stop a damn big old fleet of ships from coming and fucking over Japan.
Yeah.
And the Navy pilots they're not in China, chopping up people in Nanjing. They're not. It's the Army and the Navy. There was two totally separate factions in Japan that were kind of rivals.
Yeah.
They didn't cooperate hardly at all. So the Navy pilots kind of, in their version of how the war went, was very different from, say, a Japanese army. They didn't see it wasn't the same fight for them.
Yeah.
So that's they were willing to throw their planes on enemy ships, especially during when they were still winning. They were still kind of winning up until Midway. They were willing to kill themselves because if the U.S. fleet got within striking distance of Japan, a lot of women and children would be killed, and it did. It's 63 cities.
Yeah.
7.5 million civilians.
So yeah, they weren't
doing it for nothing.
Yeah. And in a way, like I said, I really admire, the first Midway, which came out in 1976. Like you said, I really like war movies where they try to see it from, both sides. Because, like you said, the best, what we see as a villain, I guess. But the best villains, it's you have to understand that from their point of view.
They were the good guys.
They were the good guys. It's and they were trying to, fend off. So it's
they had wives back at home and
it's just same everything. As we did. So so I admire that they try to do that. Like you said, I do wish. I mean, they did go into some of the Japanese characters, but mostly it was the military characters. They didn't give any of them a backstory about their families or anything like that. They did show them doing honorable stuff, the captain of the one ship that went down with it just because he thought he had failed or whatever.
Yeah, and the guys joined him to go down with the ship with him.
Yeah.
Another thing that they showed is that, and I like they pointed it out. Japan was known for those kamikaze attacks on those on carriers.
Yeah.
But this movie pointed out that Americans were trying to do that too.
That some of the Americans did it as well.
Right. They shot down some bombers and a bomber that was coming down. It looked I think it might have been a Mitchell bomber or maybe a Liberator. I have to go back and see it. But because it came from the island, it came from Midway Island. When it was going down damaged, the dude tried to, and the whole bombing crew tried to fly it right into the aircraft carrier.
Yeah.
And Yamamoto, I think it was Yamamoto, said that, no, they're not that brave. But then the XO was like, no, I think they did try to hit us.
Yeah.
And then a couple other guys were tried the same thing. You know, if you're going to die anyway,
yeah,
you might as well.
And so, yeah, and they did show that some of the Americans did that, and the Japanese were like, oh, well, okay.
Yeah.
Good on you.
Yeah.
You know
if
what
you're
I
going
mean?
to die, you might as well just
because I think they had a
you.
perception that the Americans wouldn't do that.
Do it, right.
But yeah, some did in that battle. And like I said, this is a fairly historically accurate.
Yeah.
It was directed by Roland Emmerich, who did Independence Day 2012. He does all these kind of big CGI heavy action movies. He's apparently been trying to get this made for like a really long time, but a lot of studios didn't want to do it because he was asking for like a shit ton of money. I think he was asking for like 150 million or 125 million.
Given him the money
or something. Well, he did eventually get it.
Yeah.
He raised it, and then like Chinese investors gave him a little bit also.
Yeah, and there was some Chinese propaganda in it too.
Yeah, a little bit. Well, I mean, that did happen.
It did happen.
They're not making it up. But,
they're not making it up, but they wanted to get that in there.
But they wanted to get that in there to make like the heroic Chinese and like the Japanese fucking them over and shit like that. So there is a scene about that in there. But like I said, it is based on something that really happened. So it's not like they were just making it up. But so he did finally get it made. It seems like it's getting kind of like middling reviews, and most of the ones I read thought the same thing, that like the CG was kind of...
They were saying the same thing?
Yeah, it was kind of strange.
It wasn't grandiose enough.
Yeah.
This movie should have been bigger.
Yeah.
It should have felt more real. It should have had a bigger all-star cast. That's what it should have been.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good cast. It's like, and everybody did a good job.
Should have had Tom Cruise in it as one of the damn admirals. He could have played an admiral. You just needed an all-star cast. That's the way they would have done it in old Hollywood.
I mean, you have to admire the ambition, because like I said, Roland Emmerich is like this. He's been wanting to make a movie about the Battle of Midway for like years and years. And the budget was like kind of getting in the way. But you have to admire the ambition of somebody. He recreated the attack on Pearl Harbor. Yeah. He recreated the whole entire Battle of Midway, like
the Doolittle raid.
The Doolittle raid, just pretty much historically accurately.
Yeah.
I do just wish that the CGI, or I wish that it would have looked a little bit different, because, like I said, the lighting of it was very flat. The CGI was like, it wasn't bad.
It's not bad CGI, but it wasn't fucking outstanding. It wasn't totally believable.
Yeah, it was just a little bit off, and it just kept. And like I said, it wasn't even just the battle scenes, because those looked pretty good. Other than, like you said, when the planes caught fire and like fell in it didn't look entirely real.
Yeah.
But even, like I said, even when there was just guys like standing talking on the aircraft carrier, you could tell that they weren't there. Yeah. You know what I mean? So, and it was like bothering me. Maybe just because we like saw it. But like I said, this is, if you like war movies and particularly like historically accurate ones.
Oh, it's the best one in a long time.
This is like, it's a really enjoyable movie. I was like, even though I kind of knew some of the details of the battle and everything like that just from history class in school and whatnot, but you know what I mean? It's interesting to see like, the strategy and all the like code breaking is like from both sides and how the battle went and all the characters and everything. I do wish they had done a little bit more character development, because the cast is so big and it's like they can't spend a lot of time with everybody. This is more like a military strategy movie rather than a character movie. Yeah,
it wasn't quite the Saving Private Ryan fucking quality though.
Yeah, that's true.
That's the thing.
That's true.
This should have been almost like Saving Private Ryan quality film. It's still really good, though. It's really good. It's good.
Yeah.
It's just not really... the story is so good.
Yeah.
That the visuals should have been...
Yeah.
Fucking the best, the best money could buy.
Well, like I said, I think that happens a lot with these kind of like big budget, like these big epic scale movies. I think the reason Saving Private Ryan worked is because even though it was, an epic thing going on in the background. No one, there was no CG, but two, they kind of focused on a smaller story within the larger context.
It's easier to do.
Which that's easier to do, and it's easier to get people more emotionally invested because you actually care, like if these people get killed or whatever. And I do feel like in this one, other than the best character, who, had the most larger than life personality, he was like the most likable character, and the one you knew the most about. So I'm glad that they had that character in there at least. I do wish that they would have done a little bit more character development just so you could kind of get into people's heads more. You know what I mean? But I can see how that happens with, you know, a movie of this scale where you're trying to historically recreate, you know, a battle that really happened.
I would like to see if it's possible to remake Patton. I mean,
I'm surprised no one's gotten around to doing that yet.
Patton was a masterpiece.
Unless they did, and I just
George
didn't know about
C.
it.
Scott played himself. He didn't play.
Yeah.
He didn't play Patton, because if you've heard recordings of General Patton, see pictures of him, you know, he was he didn't sound like that. He didn't really look like that. All right?
Yeah.
And in fact, there were a lot of generals like General Patton. Patton was just, they made a movie about him and made him into an icon just based on the back of that movie. One general that served with him says, man, I would have loved to have served with that General Patton. Because it's not quite that, you know what I mean? That was the movie version of Patton.
Yeah, real life is never as fun as the movies.
The thing is with that Patton movie is that all the tanks were painted up American tanks. So the German tanks were American tanks painted up to be German.
Cheaper.
You couldn't get a hold of German tanks in numbers in those days. But CG, you could get German tanks. You could get it. But how could you replace George C. Scott? Who could ever do that?
See, that's one of those movies that I'm sure they'll get around to remaking it someday because the law says that you have to remake everything.
They'd have to make him more of a pussy, though. Today they would go, oh, well, no, I don't know. We can't say that. You know, because there was some dialogue in that fucking movie about greasing the fucking wheels of their tanks with the guts of the enemy. All kinds of weird shit like that. I don't know if that would fly nowadays in Hollywood.
Well, I don't know if that's something that they really said. Then yeah, they would put it in there probably.
I think that was just evidently pretty much most of the dialogue out of the movie out of Patton was a Patton-like statement.
A Patton-like statement.
Yeah, because not everything was recorded.
They said, well, that sounds like some shit he would have said.
Yeah.
Let's put that in the movie. That sounds good.
Right, yeah. So he's kind of more of legend than, even though he did exist.
Yeah. Well, I feel like that happens with a lot of movies, particularly ones that are about a character. Because, like I said, real life is always more boring than the movies. And that's why they have to, sex everything up for the movies, because real life is kind of boring.
Yeah, he wasn't a very big guy, and he was kind of had a nasally voice. That's how Patton talked.
I feel like they all talked like that back then. Yeah. What was that about? Everybody back in that era, maybe it was just because that's what the recording sounded like. The recordings weren't as good. So everybody just sounded like all the newscasters and stuff like that. They all kind of sounded like coming to you live. It's funny. Well, it's just kind of like the old movies where when you see old silent movies and stuff, and the cameras were and old World War I footage, we were talking about, with that documentary They Shall Not Grow Old, where it's that old footage was all hand cranked. So whenever they try to show it as a film, everybody looks like they're moving really fast or all jerky and shit. It's they don't really move like that. It was just the way they filmed it. So I feel like maybe that's what happened with all the voices. Maybe it was recording technology.
But Midway, we're actually seeing Midway late. It'll probably be out of the theaters pretty soon, I would think.
Yeah, I thought this was its last week, but I guess not.
But you might want to see it. If you like war movies, you may want to see this one before it goes out.
Yeah, it's decent.
It's got an awesome story. It's true. The acting in it's really good.
Yeah, I liked all.
A lot of this movie is very good. It's just that this movie. The setting is so epic that if that CG isn't fucking spot on, it's not very believable. It's bad. But it was kind of piecemeal. There were certain times where it was kind of
was good.
But then there was a couple times where
sometimes it kind of looked like a video game a little bit. Yeah. You know what I mean? And it was kind of throwing me out of it.
But I'm going to forgive it for that.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, he's been wanting to make this movie forever. And, it's maybe he didn't get quite as much money as he wanted to make. He got a lot, but, I don't think he got quite as much as he wanted. So
it's very fast-paced.
It is, because like I said,
there's a lot of stories in
the story. It's a very complicated story, because they kind of start, the beginning of this with the attack on Pearl Harbor a little bit before that.
They even get into the code-breaking angle.
Yeah, which I liked that. That was probably my favorite aspect of it, how they found out, because Midway was supposed to be a surprise attack, Pearl Harbor was, and they thought that, the military thought they were going to attack somewhere else, and then, they had, all the code-breaking, and they actually figured out, no, it was Midway, and... the one guy knew, Patrick Wilson's character was trying to tell everybody, he's no, it's going to be Midway, it's not going to be this other... I think they thought they were going to attack the Aleutian Islands, right? or something like that. They thought they were going to attack somewhere else, and
right.
But they, they went through all the code breaking and stuff. So yeah, if you like war movies, like I said, it's not the best war movie I've ever seen, but he did seem to like take care to make things accurate, and like at the end, I like how they had the picture of the real guy and like what ended up happening to them and all this other kind of stuff. So it's, even though the CG was a little in, kind of took me out of it a little bit, but that was kind of the only problem I had with it. I think other than that, it was perfectly enjoyable and kept me interested the whole time. So